granniopteryx, granniopteryx. She knows the truth, she's linking every link.
Hello, are you as confused by the Keir Starmer business as I am? Because I can't make any sense of it, but I do have 3 documents that might boil it down to something understandable to me. I don't know about anyone else. There may be other people watching this who have a better grasp of the situation. But first, I'll just go through what the Telegraph said yesterday. Sir Keir Starmer has been accused of a cover-up over the Mandelson vetting scandal in an attempt to save his premiership. Now, just a minute. Some of you might have been living under a rock or orbiting the moon or something while this was going on. So just in a few words, I shall say that what happened was that Keir Starmer wanted Peter Mandelson to be the ambassador to the United States. Peter Mandelson flew over, no doubt first class, to the United States, shook hands with President Trump, installed himself in the ambassadorial palace, and then within a couple of weeks, when some more of the Epstein documents came out, it was discovered that even after Epstein had been convicted of nasty stuff, remember, most of my audience is on YouTube. I keep saying I have to be careful. I am not being mealy-mouthed. I'm just trying to get my video out. Okay, so the Epstein things came up, and some photographs of Peter Mandelson. Now, he was immediately the centre of a storm, and within a few days he was coming back to Britain. First class again, no doubt, and no longer the ambassador. I know they found somebody else. I mean, there was an ambassador there already, apparently, and apparently a very experienced diplomat who everyone said, even before the scandal blew up, should have been left in place. But it seems that somebody in the government wanted Peter Mandelson there. Now, this is the first part of the confusion, because I have, oh dear, that's, that might be better. Because it seemed like Starmer was desperate to have Mandelson in Washington. He seemed to have this idée fixe, but it looks like David Lammy had the same fixed idea, because here, this is, well, I'll go through the documents first, okay? That's what happens when you don't have notes. I don't have notes, I just have some documents here, so I'm winging it, and I'm probably going to get things out of sequence. Okay, so the first thing is this. Press release from HM government on the 20th of December 2024. That is within 6 months of Keir Starmer taking office. Appointment of Lord Mandelson as the next British ambassador to the United States of America. The 20th of December. Right. Next document. Another press release from HM government. New permanent Under-Secretary appointed at the Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office. Sir Oliver Robbins, who is almost universally being called Ollie Robbins in the newspaper. And he has been appointed as the new permanent Under-Secretary at the Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office. This is dated the 8th of January 2025. And Mandelson was appointed on the 20th of December. So it looks like Ollie Robbins was appointed at least 2 weeks after Mandelson got the job. So you may ask why Ollie Robbins has been sacked. he is obviously not responsible for the appointment. As a matter of fact, this letter has surfaced from Ollie Robbins to the Right Honourable Richard Holden MP, the Shadow Paymaster General. There's a shadow, if you're not in Britain, you might not realise that. That means the Conservative Party is not in power, but they have a shadow government. So if the Labour Party just evaporated, got kidnapped by aliens, or just all decided to walk out, the Conservative Party could step in and they have a cabinet already. That's why a lot of people have been, a lot of Americans, for instance, are very shocked at the speed with which governments change here. Let's say the election is on Thursday, and the ruling party loses the election on Thursday. On Friday, the moving vans are there, taking the no longer Prime Minister's stuff away. On Saturday, the new Prime Minister is being moved in, and on Monday, the new Prime Minister is already having a meeting with the cabinet that was the shadow cabinet. It's as quick as that. Anyway, so Richard Holden is the Shadow Paymaster General, and on the 24th of July 2025 he must have communicated with Oliver Robbins, who sent him the following letter. Thank you for your letter of the 30th of June. Goodness me. So Oliver Robbins got a letter from Richard Holden on the 30th of June and responded on the 24th of July. Yeah, and I thought I was a bad correspondent. Anyway, I am replying as head of His Majesty's Diplomatic Service. That is, the diplomatic service would be the people who would be in charge of organising ambassadors in various places. Given that the Diplomatic Service Code is the relevant ethical code for Lord Mandelson as an ambassador, Lord Mandelson is aware of his obligations under the code. Lord Mandelson was directly appointed to the role by ministers to take advantage of his political experience and skill, and he and I will continue to apply the code against that backdrop. I don't know what Richard Holden was asking, but I can see this. Lord Mandelson was directly appointed to the role by ministers, plural. So it means at least two of the ministers in the cabinet appointed Mandelson directly, without any reference to the Foreign and Commonwealth Office or the Diplomatic Service or any of that stuff. Now, let me remind you, here he is being appointed on the 8th of January. And here, Lord Mandelson is appointed on the 20th of December of the previous year. So who are these ministers? Well, it could have been Keir Starmer. It could have been plus David Lammy, who was the Foreign Secretary at the time. I think could have been Yvette Cooper. She's moved around a bit, but she was Home Secretary at one point. I've no idea what she is now. I'm just losing the will to live, keeping up with the Labour Party at the moment. But anyway, I'm just naming three of the top rank. The point is, ministers mean at least two of those people. Maybe there was another one I don't know about, but yeah. Appointed Peter Mandelson. And not Oliver Robbins. Now, Mandelson, what difference does it make? Starmer said that Robbins hadn't told him that Mandelson had failed the security vetting. It turns out, apart from his dodgy relationship with Epstein, he was also on the board of a company that was owned by China. Anyway, that hasn't been mentioned so much. It's the Epstein thing that people have been concentrating on, but I'm not entirely sure that it's really the most important. We knew that Mandelson was dodgy before that. He had been forced to leave his job in Tony Blair's government because he'd been doing some dodgy dealing with financing a flat he'd bought or something. It's a while ago now. Jeffrey Robinson, I think, gave him money. Yeah. And people give him money all the time. He seems not too concerned about that. Anyway, Oliver Robbins didn't appoint him. And Starmer says, you didn't tell me he'd failed the vetting. What was Ollie Robbins supposed to do? The man had already been appointed. Why is he being sacked? Now, if you look at the list, I don't have it right now, the list of people that Starmer has sacked recently, it reminds me of Macbeth. You know, he was doing away with all his possible rivals, one after the other, till he was finally just on his own with Macduff. And that's what's going on with Starmer. Hang on, I was looking at the newspaper, wasn't I? Let's get back to that. Opponents have questioned his defence after it emerged that his cabinet secretary and other senior officials were aware of the decision for weeks before it was made public. The decision to have Mandelson as the ambassador. Sir Keir sacked Sir Ollie Robbins for not flagging the security concerns, but gave his full backing to Dame Antonia Romeo, his most senior civil servant, who also failed to tell him. So, in other words, he was sacking Ollie Robbins because he's a high-profile civil servant, and he probably, it looks like he thought, well, if I sack him, everyone will think I'm being decisive and clearing the decks or draining the swamp or something. Allies of Sir Ollie have suggested that the Prime Minister does not want to sack yet another senior figure over the Mandelson scandal after losing Sir Chris Wormold, his former Cabinet Secretary, and Morgan McSweeney, his Chief of Staff. He had to sack those as well. Or he may not have had to do it, but he obviously thought this was a good idea at the time. Sir Keir is determined to hold on to the Labour leadership despite mounting pressure. Well, I can imagine he is, because next in line is Angela Rayner, and that's too embarrassing for words. I think Starmer cannot bear the thought of being superseded by somebody like Angela Rayner. I mean, Keir Starmer is definitely second or third class in quality control terms, but Angela Rayner, oh my goodness me. I mean, she was there in the being interviewed before the election, talking about how many houses needed to be built, and it turned out she was wildly off. She had absolutely no idea about the housing needs of the country. Yeah, we're going to build an extra 1 million houses. And the interviewer said something like, but are they going to be for average Brits, or are they going to be for the new immigrants that you've let in, or let's face it, the Boris government let in as well in such huge numbers? And she said, oh no, there's plenty of housing. And obviously there isn't. I'm getting off the subject, aren't I? Anyway, Angela Rayner is, if you think that Keir Starmer is bad, just give Angela Rayner a whirl. It's not going to be fun. Downing Street was forced to deny claims that emerged on Saturday night that it was made aware of the risks associated with appointing Lord Mandelson. So this guy, I mean, the photographs might not have been there, but just think about Peter Mandelson, that famous photo of him in his underpants. If only for that you can tell what sort of a person he is. Now, I'm not a great stickler for standing on ceremony, But when you are in your room and a woman comes in and you have your underpants on, the most normal men would grab a towel or quick get my trousers on, or grab a pair of shorts, or pull the sheet out or something. It's just not appropriate to stand there discussing. I mean, it wasn't like she'd just come in. She was holding some sort of clipboard or papers, as far as I remember, and he was talking to her. He was not making any effort to hide his underwear. And, you know, obviously you can say, well, he was decently covered. He wasn't exposing himself. But they were his underpants. And that's the sort of person that we were narrowly escaped having as an ambassador. Does that sound really ridiculous, that I'm using those underpants as an indication of his character? Because I can't get that out of my mind. The fact that somebody was in a state of undress and wasn't trying to make himself decent when there was when a woman had come into the room. Anyone, even another man. Well, especially another man. All right, well, look, that's what I've got to say. Yeah, no, not quite, because I made some more notes. There's so many stories going round, and so I'm going right off the subject here, but I thought you might be interested. There are so many stories going round. It's, as I said, very difficult to get a handle on what actually happened. Now, I can't explain to you what actually happened. I can't tell you who is actually to blame, except that since Keir Starmer is the man at the desk where the buck stops, whether he's responsible for it or not, he's responsible for it. So I'm in no way excusing that man. But I just want to remind you of something. This whole business reminded me of Russian disinformation tactics. What Russia did when it was trying to hide responsibility for various things. This was a well-known technique. They didn't just issue a denial or come up with another story. They came up with a dozen other stories. And knowing that people would hear one story after the other, and then they just melt down. You know, you wouldn't know what to believe. So I made a list of what the Russian government said after the Skripal poisoning, just to remind you of how this technique works. And it wouldn't surprise me if the Labour Party weren't using this technique as well to confuse people, like I'm confused. I am confused. All right, hang on a minute. So I made a list here, what the Russian government said about the Skripal poisonings. Now, if you, again, just to fill you in, refresh your memory or whatever, this guy, Skripal, and his daughter, Yulia, were in Salisbury, the town of Salisbury. Nice little market town with a beautiful cathedral. Okay, and he had done a runner from Russia. He was poisoned with Novichok, and it nearly killed him. It was just very lucky that one of the people in the ambulance that picked him up gave him an injection of the particular drug that's an antagonist to Novichok, and that was just luck. He happened to, he didn't know what was wrong with him, but he happened to pick that particular poison thing, and it saved Skripal's life. About, I think, something like 5 or 10 miles away from Salisbury, there is a biolab research place called Porton Down. So you should know about that. But it's a long way away, and it's very strictly controlled. So here, just a minute, I'll get that sheet up. So this is the story the stories that came out of Russia. Russia had zero involvement. The entire incident was a provocation, fabricated by the UK or the US intelligence services to get at Russia. And then the two men who were supposed to have done the poisoning, they were innocent civilians who were just visiting Salisbury by chance. And any passport data leaks were faked. And then the other story, the case was staged to spoil the World Cup football match. And then it was the UK, that is MI6 or MI5, they were the ones who staged the attack on its own soil to frame Russia. Oh, and then they said it was a leak from Porton Down. Somehow the file of because they were kept in these flasks, of the poison came, sort of skipped out of Porton Down Research Centre and across 5 miles of fields and landed on the Skripal's doorknob, which is the vehicle, which was the vehicle for the poison. When they came out, they closed the door. They got the stuff on their hands. Now, the next story was it never happened. The Skripals were placed in an induced coma to mimic the poisoning. All right, and then the agent came from somewhere else. It came from the US, the Ukraine, Czech Republic, Iran, that's a good one, Uzbekistan, right? Okay, next one. Skripal was smuggling or handling chemical weapons. Right, so it's Skripal did it to himself. Skripal was a drug addict and overdosed or attempted suicide with his daughter. Right, no real poisoning occurred. It was used as a pretext for a NATO budget increase. Let's see. Again, it never happened, but it was done by Ukrainian nationalists. It was done by exiled Russian oligarchs. It was done by the CIA or somebody in the Baltic, the Estonians or the Latvians or the Finns or whatever. All right, now, it never happened, but it was done by rogue GRU elements acting without Kremlin approval to undermine Putin. Right, it was a revenge plot tied to organised crime or to Skripal's past dealings. All right, the next thing, Yulia, Skripal's daughter, brought the agent in her luggage from Moscow when she was visiting. The CCTV showing the poisoners, turning up in various parts of Salisbury close to the Skripal's house, that was just doctored. It was the UK intelligence silencing critics. Right, so all of these stories were released until finally they thought that nobody would believe anything about the actual truth, which was that 2 Russian secret agents came pretending they were sports equipment or sports drink sellers, and they turned up in Salisbury and they poisoned the doorknob, and they actually poisoned somebody else because they threw a bottle of the Novichok away, and it was in a perfume bottle, and some woman, some fella picked it up, and this woman she gave it to his girlfriend, and she put it on, it didn't smell of anything, and it killed her very quickly. She'd smeared it all over her face and neck. That was just awful. The man survived because he'd just got a bit on his hands, I suppose. Anyway, so that was the terrible tragedy of the Salisbury poisoning, but you can see what the Russians were doing. So many stories, and they thought the truth would get buried in the avalanche of contradictory theories. Well, That's what's been going on here as well. And it wouldn't surprise me if the Labour Party hadn't taken that Russian lesson and are just releasing all sorts of stories and sacking all sorts of people to muddy the story until you just give up trying to find the truth. Well, I have given up. There are too many elements, except for one thing, those underpants. I know that Peter Mandelson is not ambassadorial material because he is a fellow who can't even grab a towel when a woman comes into his bedroom to talk about something or whatever, and he stood there in his underpants. I also knew, he'd been caught with financial finagling years before, so I knew that already, but I'm telling you, those underpants clinched the deal as far as I'm concerned. So all of these funny stories, they don't mean anything. They're just totally irrelevant. Right. Well, I hope you find yourself a lot better informed now. No? Still confused? Yeah, so am I. Except for one thing. Peter Mandelson should not have been appointed, and it's obvious that his appointment was pushed through by either Keir Starmer and at least one of his other cabinet members, or by his cabinet members with the approval of Keir Starmer. And that's all you need to know that the government of Keir Starmer is a bunch of lying hounds. Sorry, that's an insult to hounds. Okay, till next time. You can help my channel by subscribing and clicking the notification bell. That's quite important. And by sharing if you're so inclined. Links to my other channels and to donation methods are in the description. But the best way you can help is simply by clicking like and notify. Thank you.